I was never the most academically brilliant or the most academically gifted in my class.
Welcome to the first episode of Law Unscripted. This is Disha Bess, and today we will be diving into the many opportunities the legal world has to offer. Guided by the insights of a seasoned expert, allow me to introduce Mr. Rajeev Rambhatla, partner at Luthra Luthra Law Offices, Hyderabad, with over a decade of experience in areas such as commercial litigation, dispute resolution, and regulatory matters. Formerly the head of Kingston and Kasiba's Hyderabad office, Rajeev sir now leads Luthra's dispute practices in Hyderabad, advising major clients such as Standard Chartered Bank, Citibank, HPCL, and Tata Motors. He's also recognized as an up-and-coming lawyer by Chambers Asia Pacific. Please tell us about how you realized you wanted to pursue law.
Sure. So, to be very honest, I really didn't know whether I wanted to pursue law or not. I was like any high school graduate, somebody who was finishing a 12th standard, and I was very confused at the time. And I had a few options for me, but I had the opportunity to visit the National Law School campus in Bangalore, growing up in Bangalore, and I had somebody in my family taking up the BC position at Adidas at the time, so I visited the campus. I had no idea what the National Law School was, but I just saw the campus and the library and everything, and sort of just that entire journey sort of just inspired me to take up law. So yeah, I think it was, I would say more, I would put it like the law chose me as opposed to me choosing the law, because at a time when I was sort of deciding what I wanted to do with my life, I stumbled upon law as a career path, and I ended up choosing it.
Thank you for the answer. Could you take us through your law school journey, and what would you say about how a student should balance their work and life in a law school?
Sure. So I think my law school journey, like pretty much like any other law student, was full of ups and downs. And for me personally, I always believed, even throughout law school, to have a good mix of extracurricular activities along with academics. I was never the most academically brilliant or the most academically gifted in my class in terms of grades. Having said that, I always ensured that I sort of had a presence in law school apart from just academics. Of course, I'm not encouraging students to not focus on academics. That should remain a priority throughout law school. Having said that, I think what one should also focus on is a holistic development of a professional through the 5 years of law school, right? So I know a lot of friends. I was always very passionate about public speaking all through my school, but I know a lot of my friends in law school who weren't the best public speakers when they first came into law school, but by the time they finished 5 years, they're some of the best voters, some of the best debaters, and some of the best public speakers that I have ever seen. And for me as well, I try to focus on that journey of public speaking, be it through competitions like moot courts, which I participated in right from my first year. I still recall I started doing client counseling competitions for the first time when I was in my second year of law school, and these were very new back then as concept. I also used to do in my school days and early law school days, I also used to do MUNs, which I participated in. But then slowly towards, as law school progressed, I realized my passion towards parliamentary debating, which is something that I really enjoyed. I was among the forerunners in my college for events in the parliamentary debating space, and I used to also be a part of our DEBSOC, which is a debating society. And I was very passionate about those events, and also moot courts as well. Although I did a lot of internal moots in college, I didn't have a chance to do a lot of external moots, but I did a lot of PD competitions pretty much across various law schools and engineering colleges in India, and I think that was a fairly enriching experience for me. And it also helped me develop sort of the confidence in public speaking that I think I have now, which I think comes from those days of various activities, be it client counseling, parliamentary debates, or voting.
As you said, you were really into parliamentary debating.
Yes.
How would you say one's public speaking skills affect their legal careers given different areas such as corporate, litigation, and other areas?
Sure. So, I mean, I think public speaking is definitely a core skill that all lawyers need to have. Having said that, I don't think it defines anybody. given that the law is so diverse now and there are so many options and practice areas available to young lawyers such as yourselves who are entering the profession now. Of course, in terms of litigation or in terms of somebody wanting to be a practicing lawyer or somebody wanting to be an arguing counsel, of course, public speaking and your ability to craft arguments and your ability to put forth arguments in court and in high pressure situations is something which is very important and it cannot be overlooked. But having said that, I know a lot of lawyers who also work in other practice areas such as general corporate, private equity, venture capital, capital markets, banking and finance, and various other things where the need for public speaking is not really there, but it requires a lot more analytical thinking. It requires the ability to crunch numbers, the ability to look at documents, the ability to think outside of the box, and to just think from more of a business perspective than just a legal or a courtroom perspective, right? So I think, as I was saying in my previous answer as well, I think holistic development is something that one should look at. Why public speaking is important. It also, I think, as an individual, it is for you to decide what field within the law that you want to pursue. And I think based on that, the core tenets that would be required, or the core skills that would be required would vary.
Coming to your career aspect, you started your legal career as an in-house counsel at SREI Infrastructure Finance Limited, then shifted to corporate and then to litigation. How would you say that job hopping has affected your journey, and how would you recommend it to young lawyers?
Right. So honestly, I wouldn't recommend it to anyone or to young lawyers. Having said that, I think my journey was something that I found very interesting and even very confusing at times. I was very excited to start my career as an in-house counsel. I wasn't really sure how to start a career, being a first-gen lawyer, being somebody who comes from a family where both my parents are not lawyers. I wasn't really sure of how to go about the career, or I wasn't even really sure about where I saw myself long-term in law as a career. So as I was finishing law school, I sat for campus placements, and I was fortunate enough to get a placement with a company called Shrey Equipment Finance, which is from Shrey Group, which is a Calcutta-based group that has various business interests. And of course, I was part of the equipment finance operations, which were at the time in a joint venture collaboration with a French bank called BNP Paribas. So the entity was called Shrey BNP Paribas, and I was based in their Bangalore office. I joined the company as a management trainee legal, and I was essentially meant to be on, so this was an NBFC, and I was essentially meant to be on the legal department of the recovery team, wherein we would basically focus on recovering the loans given out by the company towards customers and repossessing assets, because the company was essentially dealing with equipment financing for agriculturists. So these were agricultural equipment, farm equipment that was basically bought on a loan, and these loans were provided by the company to the farmers. So that was my first role. I realized during that role, I was there for about 6 months, and I realized during that role that although I was called a management trainee legal, I was thrust into the in-house team. And the company naturally and the stakeholders around me had certain expectations from me as a counsel and from anyone who was in that role. And I was regularly asked with a lot of queries from people in different positions, from different teams, and as a part of my roles, I was required to advise on certain legal and business situations. And I just realized at the time, as a lawyer fresh out of law school, as someone who had not explored other facets of the law or had not ever been in a courtroom as a practicing lawyer or had ever dealt with real life issues, I sort of felt I was lacking the experience to truly advise on some of the questions that I was asked. And I think it was with that in mind, I sort of decided to gain some on-ground exposure and some real learning in a law firm first before I actually went back to being an in-house counsel. I've said this before as well, and I truly believe that to be a good in-house counsel, you have to be a good counsel first, you have to be a good lawyer first. And once you're able to do that, I think that's when you can really strategize from a business perspective and help the company that you work with in the best way possible. So it was with this in mind that I decided to move to a law firm, and that was for the first time that I went to the city that I now live in, Hyderabad, because I got a law firm opportunity there and to work with this law firm called Tempus Law Associates, where I started my law firm career. And as you rightly pointed out, started with the general corporate team in Tempus because throughout law school I was very, I wouldn't say sure, but I was sort of very determined that I didn't want to do litigation. I sort of had it made up in my mind that I wanted to do either an in-house role or a general corporate role. Because I think throughout law school, all of us have this fascination of the word general corporate, even though we really don't know what it means, but we really want to do corporate law. Everyone wants to do corporate law, right? Throughout law school. So that was, I think, the bug that bit me as well. But as I started doing transactional corporate law with the managing partner of Tempus Law, and I was doing transactions on the buy side, drafting SHAs, SSAs, investment documents, and going through all of those things, doing just handling transactions right from term sheets all the way to the due diligences. That's when I sort of realized that maybe that was really not my thing. I was able to wrap my head around it. I understood the process, but it wasn't something that really got me going or something that really got me excited. And it was at Tempus that I first sort of had my, I would say, first tryst with litigation, if I can call it that. So the co-managing partner of Tempus, who was the litigation partner, he's noticed that I wasn't very excited by corporate law, and he called me one day and he asked me if I was enrolled, and I hadn't enrolled. This is almost a year after law school, and I hadn't enrolled yet at the bar. So he sort of pushed me to get my enrollment, and he started taking me to go to the. He was a litigation partner and an arguing counsel, in fact, even now one of the most sought after in Hyderabad. And I went with Sir to courts, and this was pre-IBC era when we didn't have the NCLT, but we used to have something called as the company law board before the various high courts. And I sort of started appearing in company matters along with Sir, where I personally drafted binding up petitions, and I appeared in some of these matters as well along with Sir. And I sort of really started developing an interest in litigation, and it was from there, especially from the company and corporate oriented litigation that I was in, commercial litigation as we call it, that I was doing back then, that sort of really piqued my interest, I would say, in litigation. From there I started doing all sorts of litigation matters, recovery suits, and arbitration matters was something that I was first exposed to. And it just something struck a chord in me, and it just sort of awoke a newfound passion, I would say, for the law and for litigation as well. And from there I never looked back. I unfortunately had to leave Tempus a little while after, and I had to go back to Bangalore for personal reasons, but I still continued my foray into the litigation world. I worked with a small boutique practice in Bangalore called Pan India Legal, and as fate would have it, Pan India Legal within a few months deputed me to one of their largest clients again to be an in-house counsel as a secondary with a company called Toyota Crosco Motor, where I spent a good part of a year between 2016 and 2017 being a part of the in-house. Even at Toyota, I was handling consumer litigation. I was handling Toyota's entire consumer litigation portfolio for the South and East regions. And I worked with a very talented team, some of whom I'm still in touch with, and some of whom remain very nice mentors and even good friends till this day. I had the opportunity to work on that team, and thereafter I came back and sort of dabbled between having my own litigation practice for a while, and then slowly joined a firm called KSK in Bangalore, Kingston and Kasiva. And eventually KSK took me back to Hyderabad, given my previous experience in Hyderabad, and given the fact that I originally hail from the Telugu speaking states, Andhra Pradesh. So that's how I went back to Hyderabad with KSK to head KSK Hyderabad office. But I started my, or rather continued my litigation journey. I started my journey with KSK in Bangalore, and then moved with KSK to Hyderabad to help set up KSK Hyderabad office.
Right. So as law students, we are, I would say, we hear a lot of debate around where to go, litigation, corporate, and in-house counsel or judiciary. So what would you say was the best one for you, given your experience and all?
Right. So yes, you're right. There are a lot of options for law students, especially nowadays. I mean, of course, back in the day, I think even when I graduated, I think the options were fairly limited in terms of either going in-house or into co-litigation practice or working with a law firm. I think now there are a few more options. I think legal journalism has recently opened up. And a lot of other things. I see a lot of lawyers moving out of the country as well, doing masters in other countries and trying to settle abroad, which is I think a great avenue for young lawyers as well. Also, judiciary remains to be, I think, one of the major platforms for young lawyers as well. And I think there are a lot of other creative fields that lawyers are now, young lawyers especially, are now pursuing. So for me, as you pointed out in the last question as well, I had the chance to hop between a few jobs and sort of explore. And I really wouldn't recommend that approach to anyone because for me it was more of a trial and error. Especially because I didn't have a lot of clarity on what I was doing. And I see that nowadays the young generation that is sort of graduating now is much more different. They know exactly what they want to do, and students right from their first year onwards focus all their internships in one particular practice area, focus all their efforts working towards one particular callback or one particular PPO in a particular field with a particular senior in mind, right? So I see a lot of young law students do that. I wish I had that sort of clarity back in law school, but unfortunately I didn't. So for those who don't have clarity, I think their only option is to do it and figure it out, or as one would call it, trial and error method, which I did. But having said that, I don't think there's a straitjacket formula or answer to which is a good fit or which is a good option. It really depends on the individual themselves as to which of these options they want to pursue. And sometimes you pursue one of these options for a year or so and you realize that it doesn't really suit you and you decide to move to another option. And I don't think that's really a bad thing. I think one should really try until they find something that really fits them. Like in my case, I tried for almost about 2 years before finding out that litigation was something that I'm really, really passionate about. So I think it's more of a to each their own situation as opposed to a straitjacket answer or formula.
If you had a time machine, what is the one piece of advice you would give to your newly graduates?
I think if I could do that, I would probably go back to my young self and tell myself that litigation is something I would truly enjoy and that I should just focus on doing that instead of wasting time for the first couple of years of my career. But having said that, I think I also reflect on my journey and I also think that it was really important for me to go through that time frame that I went through before I got there. Sometimes you have to get to a particular place before you get to your destination. I don't think I'm at my destination yet, but I'm definitely on the journey, and I think I had to go through the paths that I did on my journey to be on the journey that I am and to continue on this journey that I am on. Having said that, I think that would probably be the only thing I would tell myself. But I would tell myself to keep working hard and to not give up. And that it will eventually work out. This is probably what I would tell myself if I had a time machine.
That's a really good piece of advice. So, like in your law school journey, apart from academics, what are your fond memories from that period of your life?
So, throughout law school, I think this is something that all law students would agree with me on. I think built a lot of meaningful relationships throughout law school. I had a lot of friends. I didn't realize at the time how important those friendships would be, or the network that I would build at the time would be it amongst my peers or be it amongst my seniors and juniors. Some of them work with me now across the table, some of them are peers, some of them are colleagues, some of them are even clients. And I think what we don't realize while we're in law school is the people that we're with, be it our seniors or our juniors or even our classmates, are the ones who would be in our profession and in our career along with us for almost the rest of our lives. And it's really important to focus on building a network and good relationships right out of law school. And for me, I was very fortunate to have had a good friend circle and have had the opportunity to meet a lot of interesting people throughout law school. And having been in a private university where law wasn't the only course, I was in a campus where there were students from other courses as well. So I had the good fortune or the pleasure of interacting with students from various courses, some of whom remain good friends to this day. And other than that, I think as I was saying, the co-curricular activities in law school, I was, a lot of people don't know this about me, but I was a very active theatre enthusiast in law school. I was a stage actor. I was a part of a team that won the intra-university competition almost 3 years in a row, where we beat almost every other department in a literary fest, where my theatre troupe was among the best in the university at the time. And we even did a law school adaptation of some famous Shakespeare plays as well. and a couple of them I was in fact even including merchant awareness, a couple of them I was very fortunate to be a part of. So I think it's really important to sometimes switch off from the law and also find something else that sort of drives you, sort of makes you happy. And for me, theatre was that passion which I really enjoyed in law school. Other than that, of course, focusing on law-related extracurricular activities like PDs and moods also was something that that really kept me going. And I think it's something that really helped me develop as a professional for law school. As I've said before, I feel like I've sort of entered law school as a boy, but I came out as somebody a lot more mature.
You just mentioned the fact that networking is very important when you are going through a law school.
Yes.
And you're also first generation lawyer. What would you say matters more, networking or credentials when it comes to the real life work experience?
I would say it's a mix of both. It's not really an either or situation. It's something which is a combination of both of those is what really becomes a factor. But having said that, I think networking is very important, especially for first generation lawyers, or for anyone for that matter. It's important to have a good network of people because ultimately I think our profession is something that works on networking. Whether you're an in-house counsel, whether you're a practicing lawyer, whether you're a law firm lawyer, you're only as good as your network. The famous saying is your network is your net worth, right? Which is what is I think very true as well in a real life scenario where you would actually realize that once you enter the profession as to how small the profession really is. In the legal circle, everybody almost knows everyone, irrespective of the various cities that we practice in. And I think just having a good relationship with everybody, I think really makes a very big difference. And having said that, credentials are also equally important, of course. Just networking or just knowing people in right places will not take you all the way. But I think having a good mix of having a good network and having good credentials, I think will definitely help the students go a long way.
Right. You became one of India's youngest heads when you became the head of King's Club and Festival in Hyderabad. So, what would you say is a soft skill that law school does not prepare you for, which is very important in such leadership roles?
I think law schools generally, in my opinion, don't prepare you for the profession as such. They prepare you for the theory of law. But I think everything else with regard to the profession, I think you will have to learn for yourself, which is why I said it's important to have life experiences throughout law school. It's important to have meaningful conversations with friends, with peers. It's important to have conversations that make you grow as an individual and that teach you certain skills which law school or anything else can't. Just life teaches you those skills, and it's important to acquire those skills, I guess, to be successful in any profession, law included. Thank you for that compliment. I did become one of the youngest in a leadership role when I started heading case in Hyderabad office, and I would also like to believe I did become a partner fairly early, be it at KSK or even at Tier 1 firm now. But having said that, I think one of the core skills that is very important for a lawyer in any field of practice within the law is communication. And I think if you're able to really effectively communicate with people and just make that lasting impression on people, irrespective of what field you're in, as long as you, like I said, of course, networking is one thing, knowing people is one thing, but being able to really talk to anybody, build a conversation, build a relationship with people, and to sort of just engage people, right, is I think a very important skill as a lawyer, especially as a law firm lawyer. I think that is one soft skill that I think most law schools don't focus on, or even most other colleges and professional courses, don't really focus on. And I think that is one of the soft skills I think that students should try to grasp as much as possible. Of course, nowadays I think most students are blessed with it naturally, but just trying to develop a little bit of that, the art of conversation, as I like to call it, just being able to talk to people and build up conversation with anyone and everyone, irrespective of their stature, I think is a really important skill.
The art of conversation is definitely very important. But I would like to ask you, what's that one leadership lesson that you have had to learn the hard way during your roles in various governments?
So one of the lessons that, of course, there are many lessons that I've had to learn the hard way, but I think One of the lessons that I sort of learned the hard way is nobody will take you seriously unless you take yourself seriously, right? So, as you just mentioned in the previous question, I became one of the youngest heads of an office, and as a late 20-something-year-old, when I would go to clients to pitch services of my law firm or to just meet people, more often than not, I would not be taken seriously, or I would just be looked at as another youngster who was, maybe given an opportunity that he didn't deserve, right? But having said that, I think people also will, not take you seriously if you don't take yourself seriously. So it's sometimes important for you to believe in yourself and to understand that you've been given that responsibility, that role, that leadership role for a particular reason, and that you sometimes have to find it within yourself to find that reason and to live up to that expectation, because of which that role was sort of bestowed upon you. So I think, having said that, you have to command your own respect, and you have to really stand up for yourself because nobody else will. That's something that I learned, and eventually I was able to grow into that role, and I was able to be in a situation where I would be able to hold my own in that situation. But yeah, when it started, it was a little bit of a learning curve because I was an associate and a senior associate, and then suddenly I was transitioned into this leadership role, which sort of threw me off a little bit initially. But I think as they say, you have to be thrown into the deep end to learn how to swim, and I guess it becomes one of the survival situations where you either have to survive or you perish. So I think luckily I was able to find the right skills to survive, but I think ultimately it's up to an individual to stand up for themselves and to hold their own ultimately, right? Because nobody will give you respect, you have to be able to take it.
That's really true. One thing you just said has really stuck with me. Being able to make conversations with people regardless of the stature is really important in this field.
Yeah.
So what would you say is one question maybe that a junior has asked you or an intern has asked you, or maybe told you, that has really stayed with you during this journey?
So I'm always very passionate about speaking to young lawyers, young interns, students who are currently in law school. I love attacking them. Even now I'm not sure about other lawyers, but I, for one, I have my email inbox and my LinkedIn flooded with invites from students who are pursuing the law, and even my LinkedIn messages. Most of them are internship requests, but other than that, a lot of them also do reach out to talk to me and to also interact with me. Having said that, I really like the unique perspective that I think some of the youngsters bring in. I can't really place a finger on a conversation that has stood out, but it's been very I would say insightful to interact with some of the youngsters and to just have the perspective that they have. Like I sometimes admire the confidence, and I feel if I had that perspective when I was in law school, or if I had that clarity of thought, like for example, when I graduated and I was finishing my 5th year, I had no idea what, just like when I was finishing my 12th, I had no idea what I wanted to do with my life. Similarly, after 5 years of law school, I had no idea what I was going to do with my life, or where I was going to end up, or what line of work within the law I was going to take. So I think nowadays I see some kids, they come, even in their 3rd or 4th years, they have so much clarity. They've done 4 or 5 internships in a particular practice area with a particular partner or with a particular set of partners or lawyers, and they really want to focus on that area, and they know exactly what they want to do. They've written articles on that particular area. And for me, I was all over the place. I think if you look at my internships, even I've done internships with senior advocates, with chambers, with law firms, with in-house teams. So I was a little bit all over the place. I wouldn't recommend for anyone to be the way I was. It's always great to have clarity, but I think there are always people who probably sort of remain confused, right? People who don't have that clarity. So for them, I guess I would say, just hang in there and sort of believe in yourself, and it will eventually, you have to just trust your ability that it will eventually land you in the right place, which is what it did for me. And I think that's something that really pleasantly surprises me about young people, with the clarity of thought that they have, which is something I didn't have as a youngster myself.
Either field, being a generalist versus a niche practice area, what would you think is the thing that suits the young generation right now best? given the job crunch in the market that is going on?
I think the job crunch in the market is, it comes from various reasons. It's something, it's not attributed to one particular aspect. I think one of the reasons is also the number of law students that are coming into the market every year, right? The number of jobs still remain the same, the number of firms remains the same, but the number of students keeps increasing year on year. I think so. From that perspective, also it sort of adds to the job crunch. I was reading an article recently where I think somebody pointed out it was an editorial where the authors of that article mentioned that I think only about 2 or 3% of the law students who graduate in India are actually getting jobs. The rest of them either go into judiciary or practice or private practice, or most of them do their masters, or even some of them even move up. But the ones who are actually getting jobs with in-house roles in law firms, with companies and with law firms, are only about 2 or 3% of the entire batch size which is graduating. Which I think is a little concerning, which is where I think law students would also have to expand their horizons and look at options beyond just traditional law firms. Of course, if you're passionate about litigation, then practicing with senior or by yourself is always a great option. Given the challenges that it has, despite that, I think it's still a good option which youngsters should consider, especially even now, how even the perspectives in litigation are changing. Having said that, I think nowadays law students also have a lot of other opportunities in terms of being able to freelance for countries abroad sitting here, or even in terms of preparing for your masters and having the opportunities to settle abroad, which I think a lot of lawyers in my generation didn't have or didn't explore, as the case may be. Having said that, I think maybe I don't think I can answer your question, but trying to answer your question about a niche versus a general practice area, right? I think in order to be a specialist, it's important to be a generalist first. Having said that, I think specialists are important, niche practice areas are important, and of course, being a generalist is also important. Me personally, I am slightly inclined a little bit more towards being a generalist, and I like being, like for example, my practice area, even at Luthra Luthra right now in Hyderabad, remains a little wide. I do everything right, all the way from commercial litigation to arbitration, to white collar crimes, to real estate, right? So it's sort of like a very wide practice. Because I have a sizable team as well, and I have very capable team members who help me handle all of this workload. So I'm able to handle title diligence activities in the real estate side. I'm also able to handle transactions in the real estate side, and also at the same time focus on my forte, which is commercial disputes and arbitration, right? So I think in order to be able to build a general practice, you need to have a particular vision and also have a good and capable team, which is the same for a niche practice area as well. But I think to each their own again, it's something that people really have to decide for themselves. For me, when we talk about this, this quote comes to mind, it's very good quote, which goes like, jack of all trades and a master of one, but still better than, master of none, but still better than a master of one, right? So, of course, it's great to be in a niche if you've got a niche picked out. But sometimes I think for people, a niche isn't enough. Sometimes people like dabbling with different aspects, different subjects. So I guess for me, I slightly tilt towards the side of generalists, but then again, I think niche practice areas are equally important, and I think given especially the current job scenario, it's not the worst idea to focus on a niche straight out of law school. However, I encourage law students to keep their horizons open, to keep their options open as much as possible, to keep their curiosity alive and intact. For me, what worked for me was throughout law school, I had internships in various fields. I never restricted myself to one field. And even as a graduate, even in the first 2 years, as you pointed out rightly, I moved around different roles and different organizations, and in fact, fields within the law itself. So I was able to benefit from that whole trial and error. And if someone has a clarity, great. But if someone doesn't, I think it would be great for them to keep exploring and to figure it out.
Okay, so for people who are actually struggling to find out their area of expertise or practice area, would you recommend pursuing litigation to them, because it's a really wide practice area?
Yeah, that's a great question, because when you're doing litigation, you're not restricted to one practice area. It's a bit of everything, right? When you're handling commercial commercial litigation, there's a bit of company law, there's a bit of IBC, a bit of everything that comes into it. When you're handling consumer matters, if you're depending on the sector of the client whom you're assisting, there's a bit of everything. There's a bit of retail, electronics, aviation, everything that comes into it. When you're handling specialized contractual disputes or litigations that emanate from contractual arbitration matters. Again, like for example, I remember for one of the government PSUs, oil and gas companies, we did an arbitration matter in Hyderabad where they had a dispute with, it was a tripartite arbitration where they had a dispute with one of the airport organizers, one of the airport handlers, and there was a dispute over the supply of jet fuel, right, aviation turbo fuel, ATF as it's called, to the airlines and to the airport. So that arbitration got so technical and complicated that we really had to consult experts, and in fact even an expert was appointed by the tribunal to really explain to us and the counsels and to the tribunal the metric units within which they were referring to the ATF and also the various. Basically, this was a dispute with regard to certain surcharge that was charged on the fuel and certain rebates that were allowed, essentially. But to calculate those surcharges and those rebates, it was important to understand the quality of the fuel that was supplied. It was important to understand why that fuel is supplied. So from that perspective, it became very technical. So a lot of aviation experts were consulted and experts in aviation turbine fuel and how the entire supply process it was something that was needed to be explained and looked into. So it was very interesting. Depending on the dispute that you're handling, you get to look into a niche area of the law, right? So I think litigation has its own niches every now and then. But having said that, yeah, I would recommend anybody who's unable to decide to explore litigation, because maybe like me, they might just end up finding their passion in litigation. Having said that, I think litigation gives you that perspective to sort of zero down on a field that you really like. Right? But again, if somebody is really unable to decide to practice it, I would really encourage for them to try at least one internship per semester in a different practice area, so that by the time they finish their 5 years, they're able to do about 5-6 different internships and figure out something that they really like.
Okay, so coming to a new topic of our discussion, artificial intelligence,
Right.
which is a very hot topic going on right now. So, sir, being a partner in Luthra Luthra Law Offices, you must have looked at work where you were able to identify that this is AI, this is ChatGPT or other AIs that have come up, legal AIs also. So, do you think, what is your perspective on the whole AI thing and how should it be used in the legal fraternity?
Right, so I think right now AI is the buzzword, and it's the big thing, if not the next big thing. And I'll come to the part about whether we've had work submitted by interns or others where ChatGPT AI tools have been used. But I remember I was attending a conference once in 2019 in Hyderabad where former Supreme Court, or rather retired Supreme Court Judge, Justice Chalmeshwar Rao was speaking, and along with a panel of other judges. And one of the audience members asked a question, this was back in 2019, asked a question about what Sir thought about AI in the judiciary, right, of using AI tools to help judges write judgments in the judiciary. So I still have a laugh on the chuckle when I recall Justice Chalmeshwar's answer. He said the problem with Indian judiciary is basic intelligence, not artificial intelligence, right? So just on a lighter note, I thought I'll share that. I think that's my whole take on AI, right? I think AI is only as effective as we are. It's only as effective as the intelligence that we use on it. And the intelligence, when I say, is basically the ability to know when to use the AI and when not to use the AI. I think, like for example, the downsides or rather the dark sides of ChatGPT, you would see recently there have been instances in the US where I think some lawyers have submitted certain citations and turned out to be completely made up and false case laws that didn't exist. I think that risk is always there. You have to know how to make your AI reliable. It's important to rely on AI, but it's also important to have reliable AI and to ensure that the information that you're getting from AI is fact checked. It's a great tool. In fact, even in the firm, we have wonderful AI tools that are currently in the process of testing in a pilot phase. We're trying to incorporate AI into the work. Even in the previous firm that I worked at, we had a wonderful conflict bot which was built on AI. So we used to do our internal conflict checks on an AI bot. And we had ChatGPT, both even in my previous firm and even in this firm, we have ChatGPT built into our respective firms' internal communications. Where we're able to ask anything and ChatGPT gives us the answer. But again, it's on us as lawyers. The burden is on us to fact check that and to ensure that it is reliable before we're using that information or presenting that information to anyone. Having said that, yeah, I think a lot of times, especially amongst the younger crowd, I see content that comes out, or even when we assign research work in terms of, I see drafts that are very clearly infused with ChatGPT or sometimes even completely copy pasted, and it's not uncommon anymore. It happens, and that's when we sort of have a conversation with the person and tell them that listen, we're looking for something that you've come up with, not something that you copy pasted. But I think having said that, there is a growing reliance on these tools, right? And it's important to ensure that reliance is just a reliance and not a complete dependence, right? We have to use these tools effectively to make our work quicker. Like for example, I was talking to this company recently that basically does a large-scale document review for law firms and for even both Indian law firms and foreign law firms. It's one of the global leaders in the document review space. So they were talking about how they're incorporating AI, and they have AI doing the initial checkup, the initial first level review of these documents. So essentially what happens in document reviews, they have big bulk documents that pertain to a particular litigation or a particular transaction, that instead of it being done by by the firms themselves, they outsource that to a document review company, right? So these guys basically do the relevancy check of these documents, and they confirm whether those documents, how many documents out of that entire bulk are basically relevant or not. So nowadays they're also using AI tools. They recently acquired, this company recently acquired an AI tool that does the initial check. So I was just asking them, how close AI is to sort of actually replacing human reviewers. And they said that AI can really never replace human reviewers. It can make their jobs easier. Of course, what took 40 reviewers earlier now maybe takes 10 reviewers. And what took reviewers before 8 hours can now be done in say 4 hours or 3 hours, thanks to AI or because of using AI effectively. Similarly, I think for lawyers as well, tasks like research or even anything that was daunting back in the day that took us a lot of time can be much more simplified and can be done a lot quicker using AI. And it's upon us to use it responsibly and use it in a reliable manner. But at the same time, we have to be wary of the downsides, and we have to be wary of overusing it and over-depending on it. So I think it's a balance. It's almost like a double-edged sword that sort of needs to be effectively balanced. And I think it's a great tool to have, but at the same time, AI replacing lawyers or AI replacing jobs, I think is very far-fetched. It's a long way. AI can definitely help us in doing our jobs, but I don't think AI taking over is something that is really going to happen, at least not anytime soon.
Right. So, coming to AI again, when you were transitioning from various practice areas back in the day, would you have done it differently if AI was the talk of, the art back then also? Would you have done it differently?
Well, that's a good question. Maybe not, because I don't know, because again, even when I was sort of exploring my options a few years ago, there were in fact, a lot of my peers and a lot of my close friends, batchmates are also very active in the crypto Web 3.0 space, where a lot of them are actively working in that space. Some of them are running their own firms in that space, including AI, blockchain, and all of that. For me personally, that was something that I was never too enticed by or never too interested in. So maybe for me, it wouldn't have made much of a difference, because I was more inclined towards, again for lack of a better word, towards the traditional practices, be it litigation or even general corporate for that matter. AI at the time was something that I didn't explore, but maybe if AI, crypto and all that were as popular back then as they are now, maybe I would have been a little bit more inclined to try it out. But then again, no regrets. I'm pretty happy with what I've done, and I think yeah, it's something that didn't really cross my mind at the time.
So you work with a lot of international clients as well,
Yes.
German, maybe French, and have there been any lost in translation moments that during arbitration especially,
Right.
that what you were trying to say couldn't reach out that level or something?
Right. No, that's a very, very good question. To be very honest, no, we've not had moments exactly like that where things have been lost in translation. But a lot of times it's happened, especially when me and team members are interacting with a French client or German client or even with an American client. We say something which would make a lot of sense to us, but okay, so as lawyers, of course, there are certain things that make sense only to lawyers, but even while speaking to other lawyers across in different countries or even while speaking to other professionals, sometimes we say things that, phrases that we use very frequently in India, but we forget that foreigners are really acclimated to that. Like for example, this is a lighter note which is talking about rescheduling a meeting. And of course, I think the word postpone is used globally, but I think the word prepone is something only Indians use, right? So we use this with an American client, and he was lost. He was like, wait, what do you mean prepone? And then we get to tell him that we're going to, reschedule the meeting to an earlier time. and yeah, but this was something that this gave us a surprise. But in terms of arbitration, in terms of the law itself, no. But sometimes it's a little bit of an effort to explain the law to a lawyer from another jurisdiction, because they're used to how the lawyers practice in their jurisdiction, and they expect that, like for example, I was handling this kind of complex labor and employment related issue for an American employer. Recently, the American employer was represented by a counsel in the US, and we were helping that counsel and the employer move matters here in India. And then this is basically a mix of commercial and white collar crime sort of situation where we had to go before multiple forums, the NCLT being one, and also before the police stations for registering an FIR for certain data theft and cyber crime related issues. So when initially the police station refused to register the FIR, and when we had to go to the magistrate to get an order, I had to explain to the American client and also to the counsel that there are certain processes we need to follow, and they were asking, and there was, of course, India being India, there were certain challenges with the police when we were trying to register the FIR. The other side sort of influenced the police, and we were unable to get the FIR registered in time. So the counsel grew very frustrated. He said, that's not how it works. And then I had to tell him that, see, you practice in the US, it works very differently there, whereas here it works very differently. We have certain practical issues. So sometimes those kind of things happen where they expect things to move at a certain pace. It's not so much as lost in translation, but certain expectations are there. But then I think it's important to understand that different jurisdictions work differently, and it's not fair to expect. Like if I were to advise one of my clients on a dispute in the US or in Europe, I wouldn't expect the dispute to be resolved in the same amount of time or in the same manner that it is done in India, or to be adjudicated in the same manner. I would depend on a local counsel there, and I would go by their expertise because they know that particular area best.
Right. But do you really think that the regulatory complexity in India right now, especially in respect to international companies or clients, their ability to navigate the Indian route, do you think that needs to be eased out with respect to the ease of doing business that we're promoting as a country?
Yeah, I think again that's a little bit of a yes and no, and I think definitely in terms of promoting foreign investment in India, in terms of promoting businesses coming to India, that's something that definitely needs to be done. And I think ease of doing business has been a key factor. Be it if you look at legislations like the Commercial Codes Act, the reason, one of the major reasons that it was brought in 2015 was to ensure that there is an ease of doing business, was to ensure that commercial disputes are dealt with in a much more timely manner. That's in fact one of the reasons why pre-institution mediation also was mandatorily used in the Commercial Codes Act to ensure that there's ease of doing business. And I think ease of doing business is something that the government was very seriously looking at. While also they're looking at a Make in India campaign, and they're looking at encouraging Indian businesses to be promoted, they were also at the same time looking at foreign businesses coming into India, so that there is a good healthy competition that sort of develops between the two. thereby ultimately benefiting the industry as a whole. Right. Having said that, I think yes, ease of doing business is a very, very important factor, and of course, laws and other things have to be made, accommodations have to be made from that perspective. I think the regulatory framework would completely depend on the sector and the industry that we're looking at. I think for certain sectors like e-commerce or retail, I think the entry is fairly easier and is less regulated. But if you're talking about sectors like aerospace or defense, then I think for good reason these sectors are heavily regulated, right? So I think it really depends on the sector. You can't really have a sector agnostic ease of doing business or a regulatory ease sort of thing. But I think a lot of state governments also are doing their thing to make it easier for certain sectors. Like for example, in Telangana, if you're investing in a textile company or if you're setting up a textile business as a foreign company in India, or any other business which is not restricted by the government, you have something called as a single window where basically you deal with just one single point of contact with the government, and all of your approvals, compliances happen through that single window system. Right? So I think certain governments are coming up with innovative ways to make this a lot more accessible, to make it truly easy in terms of doing business. But I guess it has to be dependent on the sector and on the industry. Some certain industries I think have to be regulated, certain sectors are less regulated. So yeah,
that's a very well balanced answer, I would say. Coming back to arbitration that we started with, we have recently also started a course at MNLU regarding arbitration. So what would you say is a myth about winning arbitration specifically that young lawyers they need to unlearn?
Okay.
About how you win in arbitration.
Right. So, yeah, thanks for highlighting the advanced certificate course on arbitration that I was recently had the pleasure, that I recently had the pleasure of being a part of. This course, I was one of the instructors along with senior advocate Salman Khurshid, formerly Union Law Minister, and this is conducted by MNLU. This is an advanced certificate course offered to young lawyers and law professionals as well, where it was basically a course that was on the conduct of arbitration proceedings in India and the process of arbitration in India. I was very fortunate. I just had one session over the weekend, and I had one more session coming up this weekend where I'm basically teaching 2 modules in this course. Coming to the second particular question with regard to winning arbitration, for me personally, I always sort of had an issue with the way the word winning is used when it comes to either arbitration or even lawsuits for that matter. I don't think there are winners or losers in a lawsuit. I think there is a party in favor of whom the judgment is given, or there is a party in favor of whom the court is given. And that's it, there is the winner. Because ultimately, I feel, again, I could be wrong, but I feel as somebody who's done commercial litigation for quite a bit of time, I feel the moment you are in a court or in an arbitration, I feel half of the battle is already lost. I think the most effective or the best win-win situation clients can have is if those issues are resolved beforehand. If, again, this is something I learned very early on in my career. Generally, people are very surprised when a lawyer says that you shouldn't go to court. But then, for me, I think the focus has always been on providing a solution for the client. If that solution can be given without going to court, then why not, right? Why do you always have to take your client to court? As a litigator, my focus is always on keeping my client out of court or keeping my client out of an arbitration. If it can be resolved through mediation or through some sort of a settlement negotiation, then why not? Because ultimately, most of my clients are businesses, and from the perspective of ease of doing business, you want business to move on. You don't want their money to be stuck in court. You don't want them to be stuck in court, and you don't want them to have a bad experience. And the problem with arbitration with courts is, again, it's obviously there for a reason. There's a reason why the legislation is, why arbitration exists. The problem with this is once you get embroiled in this litigation, it keeps going. Once the orders pass, Section 34, one party goes on appeal. Once a decree is passed from from the district court or commercial court goes to the High Court, and then all the way up to Supreme Court. Similarly, fancy then plan and all the way up. So I think it could become a little bit of a never-ending process sometimes. So I think even businesses understand this, and wherever there can be an amicable solution that can be explored, I think they're open to exploring it. And I think from that perspective, I don't see it as anybody as a winner or a loser. There's a party who has a favorable award and a party who doesn't. Right? That's basically it. I don't like the term winning or losing being associated with cases or with arbitration matters. But having said that, I think if you are able to secure a good award for your client, and if you're able to strategize the matter that matter, and if you're able to advance arguments to that effect, then I think you can call yourself a winning lawyer if that's something that makes you happy. But then having said that, it's really about getting the result for your client more than anything else.
That's a balanced and great perspective. Sir, recently Justice Sudhanshu Gulen stated that arbitration is rich man's litigation and poor men, they cannot afford it.
Yeah.
So do you think arbitration has become performative in the sense that it's more about billable hours than about justice?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think the problem with arbitration being expensive is not with the billable hours or with the lawyer's fee as such, but it's more to do with the entire cost of arbitration itself, with the arbitrator's fee or with the cost of conducting the arbitration itself. But then I think Sudhanshu is absolutely spot on with this one. He's absolutely right. Arbitration in India is rich man's litigation. It is a 5-star litigation. It is something which is inaccessible at the grassroots, and that's not what the Arbitration and Conciliation Act 1996 intended, which was adopted directly from the UNCTAD model law. It's not what the vision that our lawmakers had for arbitration in India. It was not how arbitration was supposed to be used, and it's ended up becoming sort of more expensive option as opposed to the judiciary. Right? I think when we learn ADR, when we learn arbitration in law school, we're taught that the difference or the pros of arbitration as opposed to judiciary, as opposed to the traditional judiciary, is that it's cost effective and it's time bound. And these are the two things that is not happening in arbitration right now. Right? Neither is it cost effective nor is it being time bound. While the Act itself specifies for a 12 plus 6 month time in arbitration proceedings, how many arbitration proceedings are actually being wound up in that particular time frame? How many arbitration proceedings are actually being dealt with in a cost effective manner? How many grassroots level disputes are being resolved in arbitration proceedings? If you look at the answer to any of these questions, it's no. Take the recent example of the Future Retail and Amazon CI order, where the award specified 23 crores towards 20 crores rupees towards the award itself, and 77 crores towards the arbitration cost, which is the litigation cost, which is, I think, laughable and ridiculous, right? I mean, how do you even justify something like that, or how do you even make sense out of it, right? I mean, your cost for getting an award is 3 times of the award value. It really doesn't make sense to even go for arbitration if that's the case, right? I had the pleasure of interacting with certain experts from CI and even SIF, for International Litigation Center. And one of these gentlemen from Singapore had said that there's no point of going to CI if the dispute value of your dispute is less than $10 million, which is absolutely true. Because you probably spend that much to get your award from SIC anyway. Right? So I think from that perspective, it's really important for us as practitioners to relook at arbitration, relook at the disputes that we really take to arbitration, and to advise our clients based on that, whether an arbitration would really be worth the while. As I was saying in my previous answer, it's all about what the clients want and catering to their needs, and for us to creatively ensure that we're able to get them what they want. Now, that can be through litigation, it can be through an arbitration, it can be through settlement, it can be through something else. But it is for us as practitioners to figure out how best we can get that solution and strategize according to that solution for our clients and try to keep the cost. And arbitration, unfortunately, right now has become a very expensive process. But I'm not sure how the system plans to do it. But hopefully, with the institution, with the introduction of institutions like Arbitration Bar of India, and hopefully with popularization of arbitration and maybe institutional arbitration and mediation, hopefully it will reach the grassroots more and will become more spread out. But the way it is right now, so Justice Sudhanshu is absolutely right. It is a rich man's litigation, and that really needs to change.
I think local knowledge is a good initiative for out-of-court settlement to reach the grassroots levels, because it's actually being utilized that way. So a lot of law firms, they preach work-life balance, but they promote those who sleep under their desks. What's your take on maintaining pressure under such law firms, especially for assessment interns and young lawyers who are trying to prove themselves?
That's again a very interesting question. And pressure is something which is, I think, very real in almost every field, take investment banking or any other competitive field for that matter. But even, especially in law firms, it's extremely real, and I see a lot of young lawyers suffer from burnout, and it happens. It's not unheard of. But at the same time, I think it really depends on how a partner and his team manages that pressure. I think it really depends on the firm culture and things like that. So some firms deal with it very differently. Some firms have a very partner-centric approach where the partner decides, for his team or her team, how it should be. And I think it really depends on workload management. Essentially, that's all that it comes down to. But especially from the perspective of young lawyers or assessment interns or even junior associates who have just sort of broken into the firm, I think initially getting used to that lifestyle where you're continuously working, say about 12 to 14 hours a day, or even if you've say gone back home but you're getting calls or you're asked to hop onto a call at 11 in the night to address something for your client, or you have a deadline which is like 2 a.m. in the middle of the night. Initially it could be very stressful, it could be very difficult for young lawyers to balance and sort of get on board with. But as I was talking to one of your classmates sometime back, I was telling her about how a certain firm people leave within 6 months. That's primarily because of the pressure that those firms put on people, and it's primarily because of how the workload is excessive in some of these places. But then again, I think it eventually comes down to how an individual manages it and how an individual is able to get accustomed to it. So in law firms, it's of course it is there even now the pressure comes in primarily because we are directly in charge for client deliverables, right? So because of that, there is a lot of pressure. We're directly interacting with the client, and sometimes the client needs work done. Like for example, very recently, just last weekend, we had an issue where on Friday a client reached out to us and they had summons which they received to appear before the police station for a very serious post-strategic complaint where one of their employees had made some serious allegations against a male colleague of ours. And the senior officials of this client company, along with the so-called accused person, were summoned to the police station on a Sunday. Just I think a couple of weeks back this happened, and Mr. Client reached out to me and expected us to advise on this and also represent them before the PS along with the senior officials. And obviously, as a law firm partner, I respect the the work-life balance of my team and the ability of my team. But my team also knows that when we need to work and when I need them to come in on the weekend, they are ready to do so. And we sometimes have to make those calls. Obviously, I can't say no to the client just because the matter is coming up on a Sunday. Sometimes these things happen. This is the real world, especially when it comes to law enforcement authorities, police, and all that. They prefer to do things over the weekend. Even arbitrations, a lot of them happen on Saturdays and Sundays, right? So sometimes emergencies happen over the weekends or late in the night. Like for example, I remember this one time there was a bid-related issue and one of our clients reached out to me almost at about 10 or 10:30 or 11 p.m. in the night, and they needed an urgent repetition and basically an urgent IA moved early in the morning, the very next day. We call it as a lunch motion, something that needed to be moved very urgently the next day. So obviously then my team and I had to coordinate with the work draft overnight, coordinate with the client signatures early in the morning and file it and ensure that it's done. Obviously, your answer to your client can never be a no, right? You can never say no. So obviously when these kind of things come up, there will be pressure, there will be some amount of imbalance to your work life. But then I guess it all depends on how you're able to balance it overall. Of course, if there is work 1 week, then the next week might be a little bit more relaxed. So, you have to be understanding of when certain members of your team need time off and things like that. And also while watching your own health and your own, mental stress and related things, like for example, you don't want people to struggle with just being in office all the time. So I think it's a balance which I think each individual partner needs to do for his or her own team. So yeah, it's again, like I said, not a straight jacket formula. It's something that firms need to assess. But I think from an assessment intern's point of view or a junior assistant's point of view, it can be very overwhelming. But then it's something that individuals learn to manage, and their teams need to help them manage it.
It's really refreshing to look at it from a partner's point of view right now, as a student as well. Coming back to the question, so the associate attrition rate, as we were just discussing, is pretty high right now. And what would you suggest to a young lawyer who's looking to leave a firm because of the culture? And what do you think is the importance of a law firm culture while working?
Sure. So, I think it's not just associate attrition rate. If you look at attrition rate at any level, it's been pretty high. In fact, especially at the partner level, if you look at the last couple of years, if you just open LinkedIn or Bar and Bench or even Loctopus or one of these platforms, you will see the number of law firm partners that have moved around from one firm to the other with their teams, right? But I think the attrition rate in general has been pretty high, especially when this concept of poaching partners from one firm to another is something that has been on the rise in Indian law firms, especially in the last couple of years, and myself included. I moved from KSK to Luthra Luthra just about a year ago. So, having said that, I think it really depends. Of course, attrition rate is one of the highest in the legal industry that is ever been, but that's due to a combination of factors. People leave for various reasons. But having said that, I think of late law firms are able to manage that a lot better. Law firms, as you are aware, have an infinite talent pool given the number of students that are graduating. So the talent pool is very big. So even if a candidate is finding their replacement, unless there's a very niche field or a very niche partner or practitioner, the replacement is found rather easily. Right? So currently the question about law firm culture, yes, it is very important. Law firms need to have a culture in place, but at the same time, that particular firm culture has to be sort of executed well and sort of imbibed by the respective partners in that firm. And it has to be brought down, trickled down from the partners to their teams. Like for example, in my team, of course, we are very blessed to have the culture that we have in Luthra Luthra, but in my team, it's a very client-based approach. It's client needs first, right? It's sort of whatever the means. As I said, we work on Saturday Sundays when we need to. We work midnights when we need it to. So it all depends on. I think most law firms also have that client-first approach where you need to respect the client's requirements first, and as long as those are being met, other things can be worked out around that. So I think it all comes down to basically managing the client expectations along with your team's expectations and your firm members' expectations. And sometimes there could be a mismatch between the two, but it's all about finding the right balance, I think. So, and I think firm culture is very, very important in that regard. And some firms, of course, have a little bit more, I would say, for lack of a better word, toxic-ish culture compared to other firms. But then, again, it depends on how the firm manages it and how the partners within the firm are able to manage it.
I agree, the partner really holds a lot of value.
Absolutely.
So, there's one thing that you mentioned about being replaceable right now. So, how would you say one can, at least for the lack of a better word, reduce being replaceable right now in the market, especially when it comes to interviews?
Right.
How could you stand out in an interview from a student perspective or a young legal professional?
I think it's all about making an impression, right? Especially in your interview, if you're able to convince the partner that you're talking to or the person that you're talking to in the law firm that you're the right person for that job. And essentially, if you're able to show them that you're somebody who can't be replaced easily, right, to continue the line of conversation that we've been having. I think that goes a long way to establish your credentials as a strong contender for that position. But as I said, there are a large number of law students in a large talent pool right now. So I think obviously the competition is on the rise, but which is where I think a lot of law firms, Luthra included, are moving towards an approach where they're discouraging PPOs or they're discouraging direct placement from college, and they're encouraging assessment internships and having students who intern with these teams then being absorbed, right? Which I think makes it a lot more, I think, sensible, and it also makes it a lot easier for the partners hiring as well to gauge that person. But it's never, I think, possible or even fair to expect a partner or anyone to gauge a potential associate or something potential recruit to even one meeting, right?
Yes.
It doesn't happen. But if you're able to have someone work with you for a period of 2 or 3 months, and you're able to then decide whether you should absorb them in your team or not, then I think it adds a lot of flexibility, but also element of reliability on that decision, right? Because that's the reason why actually, or one of the reasons why the attrition rate has been high at law firms, because people are hired, then firms realize that the person is not a good fit for the firm structure or the team, and then they end up moving out for whatever reasons, right? Therefore, I think if firms are able to have this balanced approach towards recruitment, where the person is being tried and tested out, and sort of already becomes a part of the team before even formally being absorbed into the firm, then I think it makes it a lot easier. And I see that even in my team, most of my associates now that I have, I think 3 out of the 5 members I have in my team are assessment interns who have converted into long-term associates. And even the future recruitment that I'm doing, I'm focusing on that model. Even the firm right now has a no PPO and no direct recruitment model, and they follow a strict assessment internship based model where we get long-term interns, we assess them, and then we absorb them into our team, which I think makes it a lot better. And I can definitely say that my team is a testament to that. Where I see 3 of my members who rose up the ranks as assessment interns, and they've been able to sort of come, and they're now with us for almost 2 years, 3 years, if not longer. So I think this is probably a foolproof way of recruiting someone, and I think it saves a lot of time for everyone in the long run. And I think it's a much better approach than just hiring 50 or 60 or 70 students en masse and then having a majority of them leaving within 6 months.
I definitely agree. Recruitment being through assessment and internship is a great way of finding that campus placements. So coming to Hyderabad, you've been working there for quite a few years, I would say. You've overseen the expansion of firms there. What's one underrated quality of Hyderabad that is often unseen or overlooked? And students right now, they tend to move towards Delhi and Bombay, which are bigger cities, even though Hyderabad is also a metropolitan city, but smaller than Delhi and Bombay. Would you recommend students to also try out these cities, such as Hyderabad?
That's a great question, and in fact, I would encourage as many people as possible, especially young lawyers, to come to Hyderabad. And a lot of my team members are not from Hyderabad; they've moved and migrated from other cities. For example, the senior associate of my team who handles litigation for me in Hyderabad and indirectly in the he's from Lucknow, and he moved to Hyderabad to study and then ended up staying back in the city. And there's just 2 things that maybe say about Hyderabad to give you a perspective on the city. One is, I think Hyderabad is often misunderstood or rather misconstrued in terms of how big it is in terms of industry. There is a lot of scope in Hyderabad. You have, I think, India's biggest pharmaceuticals and pharma-related, I think, industry is in Hyderabad. You take companies like Aurobindo, fraternities, Apollo, they're all based there. Healthcare is again very big in Hyderabad. The manufacturing industry is massive in Hyderabad. IT, of course, needless to say, is massive in Hyderabad. So I think Hyderabad has the potential out of all of these cities, compared to anything like Mumbai or Bangalore or Delhi. I think Hyderabad has all of the factors of the industry there. I think one thing that Hyderabad missed on previously was having the cosmopolitan culture of the crowd, but that of course is there now. And the second thing I would say about Hyderabad is that it doesn't, unlike certain counterparts like Bangalore or Chennai, it doesn't have a language barrier, right? And Hindi is something which goes very well in Hyderabad, even in courts. So people who come from outside of the state are very comfortable in Hyderabad, be it in terms of the culture, the food, or the language. And like I said, my team associate is from Lucknow. He's comfortable with all of the courts, local courts in Hyderabad, simply because Hindi is, very accessible, very easy there, as opposed to certain other states. So I think having said that, Hyderabad is a great place for young lawyers to explore, especially with the number of firms that are now opening in Hyderabad. So when I first moved to Hyderabad with Tempest, this is back in 2014, 2015, there were hardly a handful of law firms. Traditionally, Hyderabad and even Chennai have been markets where individual practitioners, senior advocates have sort of pulled the roost and have had more successful practices. As opposed to law firms, even when I moved to Hyderabad, I think Tempest and a few others were the only handful of law firms that were there. Then I moved back to Hyderabad in 2018, 2019 to set up KSK Hyderabad office. Also, KSK was one of the first 10 law firms to be set up in Hyderabad. Right? And then I think with that came a bubble of other law firms that sort of slowly started mushrooming in Hyderabad. Firms I believe like Trilegal and SAM are now considering opening offices in Hyderabad after having previously explored presence in the Hyderabad market. So I think a lot of law firms are now rushing back to Hyderabad and looking at Hyderabad as a potential market. Primarily because there is a large legal services industry there which is yet to be tapped, right? Like I mentioned, the industries that are there. Majority of them rely right now on independent practitioners, and there's a lack of good law firms, right, to handle legal issues, which is where I think a lot of firms are now trying to come in and fill that gap. And I think it's a great time to be in a city like Hyderabad. Not just Hyderabad, I'd say a lot of the cities which were previously overlooked, right, be it Hyderabad, be it Pune, Ahmedabad for that matter. A lot of these cities are, I think, doing very well, and law firms are looking at establishing a presence in these cities now, trying to bolster their practice areas in these cities. And Ahmedabad, thanks to its city, also has become very popular. Pune also, I think, is a very strong contender to Hyderabad in terms of the IT and even the manufacturing sector, automotive, that which is there. So I think with that, Hyderabad is a great place to be. Of course, like I said, language and culture place, something which is very welcoming, very open to everyone. And I think young lawyers should explore Hyderabad because there is a good mix of not just law firm but good mix of in-house options as well, given the number of companies that I just mentioned that are there in Hyderabad, either the manufacturing side or the pharma side, or even on the IT services side, which I think there's a massive, massive scope for that in Hyderabad. And Hyderabad is one of those cities where the development is very well planned, so there's great infrastructure, there's great scope for growth. So it's in that growth rate, unlike Bangalore, which is sort of on the decline, right? Hyderabad is one of those places which is growing and it will continue to grow.
That's interesting. Coming on to a lighter question, you handle a lot of high pressure negotiations and cases. What's your go-to reset? Like, what do you do to reset?
To be honest, I don't think I can answer that on camera. Just kidding. No, but I like that. So for me, I think of course, yeah, you're right. We handle a lot of high-stake matters, and most law firm partners do. It's not unheard of. But I think ultimately, we just go at home, spend some time with the family, and just find a way to reset. For me, I really enjoy driving. So major part of my weekends goes in driving around somewhere in Hyderabad close by and taking time off with my family, spend some time and just try to switch off for a bit. That's something that just brings me back to the grind. But other than that, I think you also have to be somewhere able to switch off mentally from work, completely disconnect. Although most times work doesn't let you do that, at least Monday to Friday. But somewhere you will have to, I think, as an individual, find that time to disconnect from work, connect with your family, spend some time, and just sort of focus on being a human being, and then come back to being a law firm partner. Yeah. So I think it's all about that balance.
So is social media on the table when it comes to resetting? Are you an active user?
A little bit. I'm a very active user of LinkedIn, so I'm very active on LinkedIn. So sort of my go-to social media is LinkedIn, and I am very active there. I'll use it quite a bit. Mostly for professional purposes, but of late also tends to access social media. Yeah, occasionally use a little bit of Instagram or whatever, so that also maybe does help switch off. I'm a big fan of YouTube as well, so I like to watch content on YouTube, podcasts like this one. Sometimes shorts of stand-up comedy and things like that. That's something I enjoy watching just to switch off on the lighter side. So yeah, that's something I enjoy. So yeah, a little bit of YouTube and other social media here and there, but primarily LinkedIn is my most used social media app, if I can call it that.
So social media, what is that one thing that you wish lawyers would stop doing on social media? Because there are a lot of trends coming up. Right. A lot of social media journalism, legal journalism is going on Instagram maybe, where they show highlight of 2 words or maybe a sentence, and that becomes a... Right.
So I think there are multiple things that I think wrong with that. Having said that, I encourage lawyers, especially young lawyers, to use Instagram and social media platforms to maybe spread their ideology or to speak about important things. But having said that, it needs to be done with certain checks, right? I think the biggest problem that I see with, as you very rightly mentioned, with content creators who focus on law right now on social media, is there's a lot of misrepresentation of headlines. Like for example, there might be, so all of us as lawyers, we know the difference between obiter and ratio in a particular enterprise. So a lot of times there might be things that a judge might say in a court, which is often misrepresented by traditional media or even by social media content creators. Like I recently remember these very popular social media content creator who creates finance and law-related content, and they sort of spoke about Supreme Court judgment which said that registration of a title deed is no longer valid as a title document of a property, and they sort of made an entire video of that, which is very misleading. That's not exactly what the court said. And a lot of these things, especially when you're catering to that large of an audience, right? Social media goes to even the most remotest villages in the country. So when you're catering to that large of an audience and you're spreading incorrect facts, it becomes a huge problem, right? So I think you have to, as a content creator, you have to be responsible. If you're not a qualified lawyer, maybe you should get that content verified by a qualified lawyer, and then only post it to social media. And I think the second thing I also would caution lawyers to be careful of on social media is promoting their practice on social media. It's great to share your knowledge on social media as a platform, or not to serve as much as possible. But at the end of the day, as lawyers, we're still bound by the Advocates Act 1961, right? We're still bound. Recently, we've seen a few months ago in the news that one of the leading law firms had made advertisements with Bollywood celebrities, and they were all the rage on Instagram. But eventually, BCI stepped in and had those taken down. And it's, I think, at the end of the day, it is only responsible, or it's rather only sensible on our parts as lawyers and as content creators to be careful about what we post and to ensure that we're not violating any of our commitments as being an advocate or being a lawyer first, especially that commitment to the Advocates Act, where we're not soliciting clients through social media, because as of now it's still not permitted. We're not like the UK or the US, where where our lawyers are allowed to have open advertisements on billboards or on TV or on social media. So I think that's something that we have to be very careful about. And that's something that needs to be kept in check. As long as it's just information that is being shared through social media platforms and awareness that is being spread, it's great. And I think that should be encouraged. A lot more lawyers should do that, should take their time out to share their experiences so that young lawyers and even other litigants can benefit from it. But I think at the same time, one has to be careful and try to balance those two things, which is of course violating the solicitation of clients related provisions and also sharing misinformation on social media. So as long as these two things are kept in check, I think it's a great tool to spread awareness.
That's a nice perspective, I would say. So, when it comes to the laws that US and UK have with regards to being able to advertise yourself as a lawyer and soliciting, do you think if India is allowed to do that, if we are allowed to do that, it would lead to capitalizing of such, ability, as in the lawyers who are more able, they'll be able to advertise themselves better than the others, and that would just lead to accrual of all the clients or power into a certain set of lawyers who are more able.
I personally don't think so. I mean, I don't think it's that. It's a very bad thing to have advertisement for law firms or for lawyers. Having said that, I think the biggest form of advertisement for lawyers and law firms is their work product, right? Ultimately, your work speaks for itself. So I think in India, that's what law firms try to focus on. They focus on the relationship that they have with their clients. They tend to focus on that word of mouth being, spread to others and sort of building on that. And also, I think the conferences and awards that we have within the legal community also, the credentials that adds to us also goes a long way in distinguishing one lawyer from the other or one firm from the other in terms of practice areas or their qualifications or their achievements in that particular field. Having said that, I think in markets in the US or UK, it's not just about the advertisements that are made by the lawyers, but it's also about the consumers who are consuming those advertisements. I think the mindset or the orientation of the consumers is a lot more different. In India, we have to understand there's a large section of the crowd that could be influenced by wrong or misleading advertisements. As opposed to the US and UK, where it is, at least it is an assumption that a major part of the crowd is slightly better informed and will take better decisions. Whereas in India, we still have a very big rural population where people don't know how the ads will influence them or how those ads might have them go to the wrong lawyer. So I think from that perspective, the Advocates Act has banned solicitation or active advertisements by lawyers for a reason. I think that should be respected to that extent. And as a market, as and when we're ready, as of now, I don't see need for that to be introduced in India for advertisement for lawyers or law firms to be there in India, because I think, as I said, your expertise, your work should speak for itself. If you're able to project yourself on LinkedIn or write articles on a platform and share your knowledge, and because of that knowledge people are coming to you, then great. But I don't think as a lawyer you should have to have a catchphrase or put yourself on a billboard or do a particular dance on social media for people to come to you for your legal expertise. Right? Ultimately your expertise should speak for itself, and clients should come to you because of that, not because of how viral you are on a particular reel or how good you look in a particular advertisement. Right? So I think ultimately it's the work.
I think that's pretty appropriate for the Indian context. So as we're coming to the end of the podcast, so what would your final conclusion be as to what youngsters, young lawyers are building themselves and how it's going right now in the current economy?
I think I don't think I'm qualified and capable enough to give advice to young lawyers, but I think I'll just leave them with one advice is that just keep trying, keep working hard, and there's no substitute for hard work. I think that's something that my seniors told me when I was starting, and I sort of dismissed them and said, no, I'll try to work smart and figure out ways to take shortcuts and get there. But there really isn't. There are no shortcuts in life. There really isn't a shorter way that you can take to succeed. Success is something that comes after a lot of time of grinding, and I don't think I'm there yet. I don't think a lot of us are there yet, and all of us need to keep working hard in our respective fields to eventually get to where we want to get. So I think from that perspective, that's the only piece of advice I would like to share with young employers, and also to keep their horizons open, as I was saying. Don't shut yourself off. While it is important to have a niche and a specialization, don't shut yourself off to other fields. Keep an open mind, keep your curiosity alive, keep your inquisitive as well, learn about everything. It's great to have an interest, but it's also great to know about everything, right? And I think since you asked me on the side, maybe I'll just end this answer with a couple of thoughts of mine on how law firm lawyers or how partners look at interns, or how basically the assessment of interns is done post their internship period. So I think that will be helpful for the young lawyers. So I think as law students, you would know that most of you get callback interns. You have assessment internship. But I think it's what happens after that is what is the process that most people are not aware of. So I think at this stage, see what law firms look at as or from assessment interns is the ability to be a part of the team and the ability to work as part of the team. So they're essentially looking at whether you have what it takes to be an associate on that particular team, and how we're gauging that is basically through your commitment to the work. Of course, see, knowledge and work is itself something that can be taught. It's something that we can teach you over a period of time. But what we're essentially looking at is your ability, your cognitive ability to understand the law, your ability to sit and work for long as an officer, your ability to draft emails, your ability to communicate within the team, your ability to communicate externally with clients. So that's that. I would say that that fitment that essentially as partners, as hiring partners, are trying to assess among an intern. Of course, it's great to have a very knowledgeable intern. We love students who know their stuff. But at the same time, the knowledge itself is something that can be imparted. I can teach you about the Arbitration Act. I can teach you about commercial litigation, but I can't teach you how to write a good email. I can't. Maybe I can, but it just comes naturally to a lot of people. But or I can't teach you how to handle pressure, right? I can't teach you how to effectively communicate with a client.
Thank you so much, sir, for the last part of the podcast. With this note, we end today's session of Law Unscripted, and thank you so much for everybody who's been watching.